I'm Chloe, a 30-year-old single mom. In my family, you were either the golden child or the one who learned to fix her own problems. This Thanksgiving, I walked into my parents' perfect Connecticut home, hoping that for just one night, my daughter Lily and I would finally belong. But instead of a welcome, my own father stood before everyone and called me the family disgrace, before kicking us out into the freezing November night. Standing on that perfect lawn, with my little girl crying in my arms, I felt completely erased. What he didn't know was that the very roof he stood under was being paid for by my secret $25 million fortune. If you've ever been made to feel small by the people who should lift you, let me know where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because they were about to learn a very expensive lesson. My family thought I worked in tech support. I let them believe it. It was a simple, digestible story that fit neatly into the box they'd built for me. Chloe, the single mom, the one who messed up, is holding down a steady, if unimpressive job. Answering phones, resetting passwords. It was a respectable step up from complete failure in their eyes. The truth, however, was a world away from that beige cubicle they imagined. My office wasn't a cubicle. It was a corner office with floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city. And I didn't answer phones. I built the systems that the tech support people used. While my brother Ethan was burning through my father's money on another failed startup, I was leading a team of 50 developers, while my family was patting him on the back for finishing an online certificate. I was in a boardroom, staring down a panel of stone-faced executives in $1,000 suits. I can still feel the weight of their gaze, the way the silence in the room felt heavier than air. They were skeptical. This project, a proprietary software I'd designed from the ground up, was ambitious. It was a gamble for the company. And I, a woman they barely knew, was the one rolling the dice. I didn't use flashy graphics or buzzwords. I just walked them through the architecture, the clean code, the scalable infrastructure. The elegant user interface felt intuitive because I had spent 1,000 sleepless nights thinking like a user. I answered their questions before they could finish asking them. I pointed out potential weaknesses and detailed the contingency plans I had already put in place. By the end, the skepticism in their eyes had been replaced by something else. Respect. The kind of respect I had stopped searching for at my family's dinner table years ago. After the presentation, my boss, Mark, a man who rarely smiled, pulled me aside. He put a hand on my shoulder, his expression serious. "Chloe," he said, his voice low, "you're the most valuable asset this company has. I want you to know that. This entire initiative, Stratasoft, it wouldn't exist without you." The words hit me with a force I wasn't prepared for. It was simple, direct validation. No strings attached, no comparisons. Just a recognition of my work. It felt more real than any hollow compliment my parents had ever thrown my way. That validation was what fueled me through the years of sacrifice. My life became a carefully managed cycle of work and motherhood. There were no happy hours with colleagues, no weekend getaways, no dating. My social life consisted of playdates at the park and conversations with other tired parents. My nights were a blur of takeout containers, the glow of a laptop screen, and the soft breathing of my daughter, Lily, asleep in the next room. I'd code until 2 in the morning, my mind on fire with algorithms and API integrations, then wake up at 6 to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Friends would call, their voices full of concern. "Chloe, you need a break. You're going to burn out." I knew they were right, but I couldn't stop. I wasn't just building a career, I was building a fortress. Every line of code, every successful project launch, every promotion was another brick in the wall that would one day protect me and my daughter from the world. A world that, in my experience, was conditional and judgmental. A world that looked a lot like my own family. I was creating my own safety net, one woven from caffeine, sheer willpower, and an unshakable belief that I could build something no one could take away from me. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. It came in the form of an email with a single subject line: acquisition offer. The company that owned Stratasoft had been in talks with a major tech conglomerate. Rumors had been flying for months, but I had kept my head down, focusing on my work. Now it was real. I was summoned to a meeting at an unfamiliar downtown law firm. The room was even more intimidating than our boardroom. The table was a single polished slab of mahogany that seemed to stretch for a mile. On the other side sat three people I'd never seen before, their faces impassive. My creation, my sleepless nights, my sacrifice. It had all been reduced to a single line item on their agenda. They didn't waste time with small talk. The lead investor slid a thick, leather-bound folder across the table. "Ms. Arthur," he said, his voice flat, "we've analyzed the intellectual property. Stratasoft is the real deal. As the chief architect and a key stakeholder, your buyout is a significant part of this deal." He opened the folder to the final page and turned it to face me. "We'd like to offer you $25 million after taxes." $25 million. The number just hung there in the air. It didn't feel real. It sounded like a number from a movie, not something that applied to me, Chloe, the tech support girl. I looked at the number on the page, the zeros stretching out after the 2 and the 5. I expected to feel a rush of excitement, joy, relief. But I felt nothing. Nothing but a strange, chilling calm. It was the calm of a general seeing the perfect weapon finally delivered to their arsenal. This wasn't a lottery win. This wasn't luck. This was freedom, quantified. It was the power to say no. The power to walk away. The power to be invisible to the people who refused to see me, and to build a life so far from their judgment they couldn't even cast a shadow on it. I sat alone in my car for a long time after the meeting, the signed contract sitting on the passenger seat. It felt heavier than a stack of paper. It felt like the weight of my future. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Hi, sweetie," she said, her voice bright and oblivious. "Just calling to see how you are. How's work?" I gripped the steering wheel, the leather of the contract just inches away. I thought about telling her. I thought about screaming the number into the phone, just to hear the stunned silence on the other end. But I didn't. "It's fine, Mom," I said, my voice even. Same old, just getting by." Because in that moment, I realized the power wasn't in revealing the secret. The power was in holding it. That night, after Lily was asleep, I took the multi-million-dollar contract and slid it into a simple manila folder. I didn't put it in a safe. I didn't hide it. I walked over to the filing cabinet in my small home office and placed it in a drawer, right between a folder of old utility bills and the warranty for my toaster. It was my secret weapon, hidden in plain sight. My family could continue to see me as the struggling single mom. They could continue to underestimate me. It was better that way. It gave me the ultimate advantage. They had no idea they were living in a world where I could now buy and sell, all while they condescendingly asked if I was managing to pay my rent on time. The game had changed. They just didn't know they were playing it yet. The phone calls started subtly, little feelers sent out into the world. Ethan, my brother, would ring, his voice dripping with an almost sickening sweetness. "Hey, Chloe, just checking in, brother to sister. How's that tech support gig going? Are you, making ends meet okay?" He'd fish for details about my finances, about Lily's school, about my general stability. It felt less like brotherly concern and more like an audit. He always ended with a dismissive chuckle. "Just making sure you're not drowning, sis." My mother's calls were even worse. Helen had a way of asking questions that felt like tiny, sharp needles. Chloe, darling, for Thanksgiving, remember to put Lily in something appropriate. Last Christmas, that velvet dress was a little much. You know how your father is about appearances. She'd emphasize Lily's need to be properly raised, a phrase that hung in the air, thick with unspoken judgment about my single mother status. I could hear the forced cheerfulness in her tone, a thin veneer over something colder, something calculating. It was like she was trying to butter me up, to soften me for a blow I couldn't quite foresee. An unsettling feeling began to gnaw at me. It was like the low hum of an old refrigerator, always there, just below the surface of consciousness. A strange unease. I'd find myself checking Lily's school schedule twice just to make sure. I'd double lock the front door even when I was just popping out for a second. It wasn't paranoia, not exactly. It was the instinct of someone who had learned, over decades, to anticipate the worst from the people who were supposed to protect her. My family had a way of setting traps, subtle at first, then snapping shut with brutal efficiency. And I felt, with a cold certainty, that I was walking straight into one. Thanksgiving Day dawned, cold and bright, just like my family's smiles. Lily, bless her innocent heart, was bouncing with excitement. "Grandma's pie! Cousins!" she squealed, oblivious to the emotional minefield we were about to enter. I'd bought my father Arthur his favorite Bordeaux, a vintage that cost more than my supposed weekly salary. I'd carefully selected thoughtful gifts for everyone, trying, as always, to buy my way into their good graces. A custom leather portfolio for Dad, a designer scarf for Mom, educational toys for Aiden and Zoe, my sister Olivia's kids, because I knew they'd complain about anything less. We arrived at my parents' sprawling colonial precisely on time. Olivia, perfectly coiffed, met us at the door. Her greeting was a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're early," she said, her tone implying that my eagerness was yet another social faux pas. She directed Lily to the playroom with a curt, "Try not to mess up your dress before dinner, okay?" No hug, no warmth, just a reminder of our place. Inside, it was a familiar tableau of perfection. The dining room table, set with Belgian lace and heirloom crystal, gleamed under the chandeliers. My father, Arthur, a banking executive whose posture remained ramrod straight even in his mid-60s, was in the study, his voice carrying clearly. "She's early, of course. Probably has nowhere else to be. Did you see that dress on the child? At least it's not another inappropriate outfit." Each word was a tiny shard of glass, embedding itself deeper. I straightened my shoulders. I would not let them ruin this day for Lily. The dinner itself was a meticulously orchestrated performance of my family's perceived superiority. My father, at the head of the table, carved the turkey with the precision of a surgeon. His annual toast was a litany of achievements: Ethan's Westbrook account, Olivia's charity gala, Aiden's soccer team, Zoe's citizenship award. He paused, his gaze pointedly skipping over Lily and me. "And to Helen," he concluded, "whose tireless dedication makes these family gatherings possible." The omission hung heavy in the air. Lily, innocent and brave, looked up at me. "What about us, Mommy?" she whispered, too loudly into the sudden silence. David, Olivia's husband, chuckled, calling it "out of the mouths of babes." My father's tight smile was a mask of barely contained irritation. "I suppose we can acknowledge Chloe's persistence in her current position. Consistency has its merits." The backhanded compliment stung like a wasp. And so it went. Every conversation was a thinly veiled competition. When I mentioned Lily's drawing talent, Olivia immediately pulled out her phone to show off Zoe's artwork, displayed in the school lobby. When I tried to discuss a book I'd enjoyed, Ethan cut in, talking about a financial article where he'd been quoted. The best portions of food were passed around everyone but Lily and me. The condescension was a constant, suffocating blanket. Then, during a lull, my father turned to me, his voice sharp with the Bordeaux I'd brought. "So, Chloe," he began, "have you given any thought to providing Lily with a proper father figure? A child needs stability, you know." The words were a direct assault on my motherhood, on my choices. Before I could respond, Olivia jumped in, announcing her third pregnancy, pulling all attention back to her growing traditional family. My mother beamed, pointedly not mentioning her other grandchild, Lily. Later, as dessert was being served, Ethan cleared his throat. He had an announcement, too. Henderson Financial had offered him a directorship, a significant salary increase, stock options. Another round of effusive congratulations erupted. My father actually teared up, something I'd never seen him do for any accomplishment of mine. This was his legacy. Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, can I tell everyone about my art prize?" I nodded, giving her an encouraging smile. She announced proudly, "I got a blue ribbon. It's going to be in the winter art show." There was a moment of awkward silence. My mother, without missing a beat, turned to Olivia. "Jennifer, tell me more about your plans for the nursery." Lily's face fell. A surge of protective anger, cold and clear, washed over me. "Actually," I said, my voice stronger than I intended, "Lily's achievement is quite special. Only 3 students in the entire elementary school were selected for the district showcase." "Well, not everyone can afford private school art programs," Olivia sneered. "I'm sure public school standards are different." "Lily attends Westfield Academy," I corrected her, naming one of the most prestigious private schools in our area. My mother looked surprised. "Westfield? How can you possibly afford that on your salary?" "I manage my money carefully," I said simply. "Must be those child support payments from the absent father," my father interjected, returning with his prized scotch. "At least he's good for something." "Actually, Jack has never paid a penny in child support," I replied, my voice tight. "Lily's education is entirely my responsibility, and I'm proud to provide it for her." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by Aiden, Olivia's son, reaching across the table to grab a cookie. His elbow knocked a crystal bowl, sending it toppling towards Lily's lap. She jerked back instinctively, and the bowl crashed to the floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. "Lily!" Olivia exclaimed. "Look what you've done!" "It wasn't me," Lily said, her voice small. "Aiden bumped it." "Don't blame my son for your clumsiness," Olivia snapped. I opened my mouth to defend Lily, but my father's voice cut through the room like ice. "That was your grandmother's crystal, Chloe. A family heirloom. This is exactly why we can't have nice things around your child. Your daughter jerked her arm and knocked it over. Just like you always were. Careless and then quick to blame others." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Grandpa." "Of course you didn't," my mother sighed. "But intentions don't fix broken heirlooms, do they?" Something inside me cracked. The careful facade, maintained for years, shattered as I watched my daughter shrink, accepting blame for something she hadn't done. My father stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger and too much scotch. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. No discipline, no respect for family traditions or property. This is what happens when children are raised in broken homes without proper values." "Dad," I said, keeping my voice deliberately calm. "It was an accident, and it wasn't Lily's fault. Accidents happen in homes with all kinds of family structures." He turned his anger fully toward me. "Don't you dare lecture me about family structures, Chloe. You who couldn't even maintain a relationship with your child's father. You who got pregnant out of wedlock and refused to correct your mistake." "Lily is not a mistake," I said, a dangerous calm settling over me. "Look at you," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. 30 years old, no husband, no real career, living off who knows what income in that shabby house of yours, sending your child to a school you can't afford, probably drowning in debt just like you always were, irresponsible with money. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Dad, maybe this isn't the time. No, my father interrupted. I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. I'm tired of pretending at every family gathering. Your sister is a disgrace to this family, Ethan. Always has been. Headstrong, rebellious, refusing to follow the path we set out for her. Do you know what my colleagues say? They ask about Ethan's business, about Olivia's charity work, and then they get this look, this pitying look when they remember. I have another daughter, the single mother, the family embarrassment. Each word hit like a physical blow. And now, he continued, gesturing at the broken crystal, she's raising her daughter to be just as careless, just as disrespectful of family traditions. That's enough, I said quietly. Is it? He turned to face me fully. Is it enough, Chloe? Because I've had enough. Enough of your sullen presence at family gatherings. Enough of watching you raise that child without proper guidance. Enough of the embarrassment you bring to our family name. Olivia, emboldened, joined in. You've always thought you were special, Chloe, but look at where that got you. A dead-end job. No husband. Struggling to give your daughter what our children have naturally. A proper home, my father continued. That's what children need. 2 parents, stability, values. Not whatever it is you're providing in that little house of yours. Lily was openly crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I put my arm around her shoulders and stood up. We're leaving, I said calmly. Running away just like always, my father sneered. Can't face the truth, can you? The truth is that you've never accepted Lily or me for who we are, I said. And I'm done letting you make us feel small. Get out, my father suddenly shouted, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. Get out of this house, you ungrateful, disrespectful piece of trash, and take your ill-mannered child with you. A stunned silence fell. Even Olivia looked shocked. Richard, my mother said faintly. It's Thanksgiving. I don't care what day it is, he spat. I want her out of my house. The family disgrace. That's what you are, Chloe. A disgrace to the Arthur name. I looked around the table. My mother, pale and silent. Ethan, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Olivia, a mixture of shock and smug satisfaction. David stared at his plate. Even Aiden and Zoe were frozen, witnessing the explosion of years of simmering resentment. I took a deep breath and gathered my dignity around me like armor. Fine, I said simply. Lily, get your coat, sweetheart. We're going home. But Mommy, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. What about Grandma's pie? There will be other pies, I promised her, my heart breaking at her innocent concern amid such cruelty. That's right. Run away, my father called after us as I led Lily to the foyer. That's all you know how to do? I helped Lily into her coat. My hands were steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. As we reached the front door, I turned to face my family, who had followed us into the hallway. You know, I said quietly, for years I've wanted nothing more than your approval, your acceptance. I wanted Lily to have the family I thought I had growing up. But now I see that was an illusion. This isn't a family. How dare you? My father began, but I held up my hand and to my surprise, he fell silent. Lily and I deserve better than this. We deserve love that doesn't come with stipulations and criticism. Thank you for making that so abundantly clear today. I opened the door and guided Lily outside into the cold November evening. My father was still shouting, but his words no longer had the power to wound me. The next morning, the lingering bitterness was still a raw wound. I was still processing the raw, brutal dismissal. But then, My phone rang. It was David, Olivia's husband, my family's lawyer. His voice was cold, professional, devoid of any warmth. "Chloe," he began, without preamble, "I'm calling to inform you that, at Arthur's request, we are initiating legal proceedings to gain custody of Lily. He believes, and we have evidence to support, that you are not capable of providing a stable or appropriate environment for her. Your lifestyle choices, your financial irresponsibility, it all points to an unsuitable home." The phone slipped from my grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. This wasn't just a threat. This wasn't just a power play. This was a direct, calculated assault on the one thing that mattered more than my entire $25 million fortune. My motherhood. My daughter. My very right to raise her. The air in my small apartment suddenly felt thin, suffocating. This was no longer about money or pride or family appearances. This was war. They wanted to steal my child. This was no longer about me feeling small. This was about them trying to erase my existence as a mother, as a human being. The anger that had been simmering, the pain that had been festering, it all coalesced into a single, white-hot point of pure, unadulterated rage. My hands trembled, but my mind cleared with chilling precision. They wanted a fight? They wanted to play dirty? Then they had no idea who they were dealing with. If you're feeling the rage I felt in that moment, help me out. Comment one word to describe what my family did. But instead of crumbling, that fury became a cold, hard source of strength. A resolve like I'd never known. I stared at the spot on the floor where my phone had fallen. David's words echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of my apartment. Gain custody of Lily. Unsuitable home. Financial irresponsibility. It wasn't an attack anymore. It was an execution. They were trying to sever me from my own child, to use the courts and the law as a weapon to finish the job they'd started on Thanksgiving. To erase me. The initial shock, the white-hot rage, began to cool. It didn't disappear. Instead, it solidified. It transformed from a wild, burning fire into a block of ice in the pit of my stomach. Cold, hard, and utterly immovable. I looked over at Lily. She was sitting on the rug, humming to herself as she built a colorful tower with her Lego blocks. She was so beautifully, wonderfully oblivious to the ugliness that was circling our small world. She was the sun, and they were trying to blot her out. In that moment, something inside me shifted permanently. The part of me that had always craved their approval, that had hoped for a miracle, that had endured years of casual cruelty for the sake of family, that part of me died. It withered and turned to dust. There were no more tears to cry, no more pleas to make, no more illusions to cling to. My family wasn't just broken, it was toxic. It was a predator. And it had finally come for my child. My mind went quiet. The frantic noise of hurt and betrayal faded away, replaced by a single, crystal-clear thought. Enough. This word, a simple, final word, settled in my soul. It wasn't screamed, it was whispered with the finality of a judge's gavel. Enough of the begging, enough of the hoping, enough of the pretending. They would never change. They had proven that beyond any shadow of a doubt. They wouldn't stop until they had taken everything. So, I would have to be the one to end it. I would have to be the one to burn it all to the ground. The pain didn't vanish. It was a physical thing, an ache deep in my chest. But it was no longer a weakness. It became fuel. It became a focus. The hurt transformed into a cold, methodical energy that sharpened my senses and cleared my vision. I saw the board. I saw all the pieces. And for the first time, I wasn't just a pawn in their game. I was about to become the player who flipped the entire table over. I picked up my phone, my hand perfectly steady. I didn't call my father to scream at him. I didn't call my mother to beg. I didn't even call my brother or sister to curse them out. Wasting my breath on them was a luxury I could no longer afford. They were no longer family. They were the opposition. And you don't reason with the opposition, you dismantle it. I walked over to my laptop and opened it. The cheerful family photo I had as a screensaver, a forced smile at last year's Christmas, seemed to mock me. I changed it to a solid black screen. It was time to go to work. My fingers flew across the keyboard. The first search was not for a therapist or a support group. It was for Catherine Pierce, Esquire, top family law attorney, East Coast. Specializes in high-conflict custody and financial disputes. Her reputation was legendary. She was known as the Shark for a reason. She didn't just win cases, she eviscerated her opponents. I filled out her firm's online contact form. My message was brief and to the point, urgent. Hostile custody threat involving significant undisclosed assets and emotional abuse. Require immediate consultation. Next, I opened my secure banking portal. My eyes scanned the numbers, the portfolio that represented my secret life. $25,782,416. The money that had once been my shield was about to become my sword. I found the contact information for Michael, my financial advisor at Goldman Sachs, the man who had helped me set up the anonymous shell corporations that had been propping up my family for years. Then, I dialed the first number. Catherine Pierce's office answered on the second ring. Her assistant was crisp and professional. When I explained the nature of the threat, I was put on hold for less than 30 seconds. A new voice, sharp and confident, came on the line. "This is Catherine Pierce. You have 5 minutes to convince me to take your case. Start talking." I didn't waste a second on emotion. I laid out the facts like a military briefing, the long-term pattern of emotional abuse, the Thanksgiving incident, the public humiliation, the exact words my father had used. And finally, the custody threat from my brother-in-law, David, a lawyer at a mid-tier local firm. "They're claiming financial irresponsibility," I said. "They believe I work a low-wage tech support job and live in a shabby house." There was a pause on the other end. "And what is the reality, Ms. Arthur?" Catherine asked, her tone clinical. "The reality," I said, looking at my bank statement, "is that my net worth is just shy of $26 million. And the shabby house my father despises so much, it would have been foreclosed on 3 years ago if my shell corporation, Arthur Heritage Holdings, hadn't been making the mortgage payments." The silence that followed was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning in Catherine Pierce's mind. When she spoke again, all traces of clinical detachment were gone. Her voice was laced with something that sounded like predatory excitement. "Ms. Arthur," she said slowly, "cancel your plans for the rest of the day. I'm sending you a retainer agreement. We are going to bury them." I gave her the go-ahead to draft a temporary restraining order against my father, citing emotional distress and harassment. Then I authorized her to prepare a countersuit for malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress, naming not just my father, but my mother, Ethan, Olivia, and David as co-conspirators. "I want you to be ruthless, Catherine," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "No mercy." "Miss Arthur," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I don't know any other way." The second call was to Michael, my financial advisor. He was a kind, older man who had always treated me with paternal warmth, a stark contrast to my actual father. When I told him what had happened, he was audibly shocked. "Chloe, that's monstrous," he said, his voice filled with genuine empathy. "I need you to do something for me, Michael," I said, cutting to the chase. "Effective immediately. I want you to dissolve all the shell corporations. Terminate every single anonymous payment. The mortgage for my parents' house, The angel investments in Ethan's company, the private school tuition for Olivia's children, the monthly stipend is to my mother's account. Everything. Cut them off completely. Are you sure? He asked, the gravity of the request clear in his voice. Chloe, the shockwave from this, it will be catastrophic for them. I'm sure, I said. They believe I'm financially irresponsible. It's time they learned what real financial irresponsibility looks like. I could hear him typing furiously on his end. Consider it done, he said finally. The notices of default should start going out within 72 hours. The final call was to Diane, my executive assistant, my right hand, the one person in the world who knew the full story. Before I even finished explaining, she was already in action mode. Say no more, she said, her voice a calm in my storm. I'm on it. Miami, you said? I'll have real estate listings for beachfront properties in your inbox within the hour. I'll start the process for transferring Lily's school records to Wellington Preparatory Academy. Their arts program is phenomenal. And I'll coordinate with HR to set up a remote executive office. We'll be operational in Florida by Monday. Diane, I said, feeling a wave of gratitude that almost broke through my icy resolve. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said fiercely. We're in this together. Now go pack. I'll handle the rest. I hung up the phone and closed my laptop. It had been less than an hour since David's call. Less than an hour since they had threatened to take my daughter. In that hour, I had declared war. I had hired a shark. I had dismantled my family's financial foundation piece by piece, and I had set in motion our escape. I walked into Lily's room. She was still there, on the floor, adding a final triumphant block to the top of her Lego tower. She looked up at me and smiled, a pure, radiant smile that could light up the darkest corners of the world. Look, Mommy, I made a castle. I knelt and wrapped my arms around her, burying my face in her soft hair. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I whispered. It's the most beautiful castle I've ever seen. How would you like to go build one on a real beach? Her eyes went wide with excitement. As I held her, I felt the last vestiges of fear and doubt drain away. My family, in their infinite arrogance and cruelty, had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were cornering a frightened little mouse. They had no idea they had just backed a sleeping dragon into a corner, and I was about to show them exactly what it felt like to get burned. They were still celebrating their brilliant, ruthless move, completely oblivious to the hurricane that was already spinning out at sea, a storm I had created, aimed directly at the heart of their perfect hollow world. The summons came 3 weeks later. 3 weeks after I had vanished. 3 weeks during which their world had systematically imploded. The foreclosure notice on the Connecticut house had arrived. Ethan's angel investors had simultaneously and inexplicably pulled out, leaving his company a hollow shell. The private school had called Olivia, informing her that the foundation funding her children's scholarships had dissolved overnight. Their perfect lives were unraveling at the seams, and they were panicking. The request for a meeting was delivered through my new lawyer, Catherine. They wanted an emergency family summit. A peace talk. They suggested a neutral location. My brother-in-law David's law firm. It was a pathetic attempt to project authority, to stage this confrontation on their home turf. I agreed instantly. I had been waiting for this. I flew in from Miami on a private jet, a detail I kept to myself. I didn't arrive in a Lexus or a BMW. I pulled up to the suburban law office in a nondescript black town car. I wore a simple, tailored navy blue dress. No flashy jewelry, no designer handbag. I wanted them to see the same old Chloe, the one they thought they knew, the one they thought they could control. I walked into the conference room, and the scene was exactly as I'd pictured. My father, Arthur, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, attempting to look regal and in command, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his anxiety. My mother, Helen, sat beside him, her face a mask of strained composure. Ethan was pacing by the window, running his hands through his hair, looking like a cornered animal. Olivia and David sat together, a united front of manufactured confidence. They all stopped and stared as I entered. They expected to see me broken, defeated, pleading. Instead, I gave them a calm, unreadable smile and took a seat at the opposite end of the table, placing only my phone and a single folder in front of me. The silence was thick with unspoken accusations. Ethan was the first to break. He stopped pacing and threw his hands up in a gesture of exasperation. "All right, Chloe, this has gone on long enough," he began, his voice tight. "This, whatever this attack on our family, it needs to stop. We know you're behind it somehow." I simply raised an eyebrow. "Attack? I have no idea what you're talking about." My father cleared his throat, leaning forward with an air of paternal authority. "Don't play games, Chloe. The bank, the investors, the school. It's too much of a coincidence. We are in a crisis. Your family is in a crisis." I let the word hang in the air. "Your family?" Olivia chimed in, her voice sharp. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Aiden and Zoe had to leave their school. Do you know how traumatic that is for children? About as traumatic as being called an ill-mannered child and thrown out of your grandparents' house on Thanksgiving?" I asked, my voice still quiet, still even. "That was different," she snapped. "That was a family matter." "Exactly," I said. "And this is a financial matter." That's when Ethan decided to play his trump card. He walked over to the table and slid a professionally bound document in front of me. On the cover, in bold letters, it read, "The Arthur Legacy Fund, a proposal for family revitalization." He tapped the cover with his finger, a smug, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Look, Chloe," he said, adopting a tone of magnanimous forgiveness. "We've all made mistakes. Things were said in the heat of the moment. But we're a family, and family helps each other. So, we've put together a solution, a way for us to move forward, together." He opened the proposal. It was full of charts and projections and corporate buzzwords. "The Arthur Legacy Fund," he explained, as if presenting to a group of gullible investors. "It's a new holding company. Dad will be the honorary chairman, of course. I'll be CEO, managing the portfolio. Olivia will run the philanthropic arm, rebuilding our family's reputation in the community. David will handle the legal side. It's the perfect structure to get us all back on our feet." He paused for dramatic effect, then looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of greed and desperation. "And you, Chloe, you will be the primary investor. We've run the numbers. A simple seed investment of, say, $10 million will be enough to recapitalize my business, settle the mortgage on the house, and establish an endowment for the kids' education. It's a win-win. You help save your family, and you get a seat at the table. You finally get to be a part of things." A seat at the table. The same table they had seated me at the very end of just a few weeks ago. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just come to beg, they had come to demand. They had concocted a fantasy where I, the family disgrace, would gratefully hand over a fortune to fund their lavish lifestyles, and in return, they would grant me the privilege of continuing to be their personal ATM. They hadn't learned a single thing. My father nodded gravely, as if bestowing a great honor upon me. "It's a sound plan, Chloe. A chance for you to correct your past mistakes and make a real contribution to this family's legacy." I looked at their faces, my father's arrogant certainty, my mother's desperate hope, Ethan's smug entitlement, Olivia's jealous resentment. They were all waiting for the old Chloe to crumble, waiting for her to do what she had always done, swallow the pain and do whatever it took to keep the peace. I let the silence stretch. I let them squirm in it. I watched the confidence drain from Ethan's face, replaced by a flicker of confusion. I watched my father's jaw tighten with impatience. I remained perfectly still, my expression a complete blank. Then, after a silence that felt like an eternity, I spoke. No. The word was quiet. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was a simple, flat statement of fact. A closed door. A brick wall. Ethan blinked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. What? What do you mean, no? Chloe, this isn't a negotiation. This is a lifeline. No, I repeated, my gaze moving from his face to Olivia's, then to my parents. The answer is no. You can't do that. Olivia cried out, her voice rising. This is our family's future we're talking about. Our children's future. Your children will be fine, I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. They'll receive an excellent public education just like I did. They'll learn resilience. It will be good for them. My father slammed his hand on the table, the old anger flaring in his eyes. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? With ingratitude? And that's when the ice inside me finally broke, not with heat, but with a cold, cutting clarity. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locking with his. Repay you? I asked, my voice dropping to an almost whisper, forcing them to lean in to hear. Let's talk about repayment, Dad. Let's talk about the family you think I owe something to. I turned to Ethan. A family doesn't watch one child get a new BMW for his 16th birthday, while the other child's birthday is completely forgotten. I turned to my mother. A family doesn't abandon their daughter at her college graduation because their son has a minor cold. I turned back to my father. And a family, a real family, doesn't tell their pregnant, terrified daughter that her child is a mistake that needs to be fixed. I let the words land, each one a precision strike. The color drained from their faces. And most of all, I continued, my voice gaining strength, a family does not threaten to steal a woman's child because their pride has been wounded. I stood up slowly, the power dynamic in the room shifting with me. You don't want a family. You want a bailout. You want a blank check to continue living your perfect hollow lives. You're not proposing a legacy fund. You're presenting a ransom note. And the answer is no. It will always be no. I picked up the single folder I had brought with me and slid it across the table toward David. Speaking of family matters, I said, my voice now laced with steel. That's a copy of the restraining order I've filed against Dad for harassment. It was granted this morning. It also contains the preliminary filing for my countersuit against all of you for malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My lawyer, Catherine Pierce, I'm sure you've heard of her, will be in touch with you tomorrow, David. I'd recommend you hire outside counsel. You're going to need it. David's face went white as a sheet. Finally, I looked at my father, the man who had called me trash in the house I had secretly been paying for. And Dad, I said, delivering the final devastating blow. You might want to reconsider your definition of what makes a stable and appropriate environment. Because while you were busy trying to prove I was an unfit mother, you were living in a home that was being saved from foreclosure every single month by the financially irresponsible daughter you threw out into the cold. Enjoy your crisis. I turned and walked toward the door, my heels clicking decisively on the polished floor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the shock, the disbelief, the dawning horror in the silence I left behind. The door closed behind me with a soft, satisfying click, shutting out the ruins of my past. The game was over. I had won. And they were just beginning to understand how badly they had lost. The town car glided away from the curb, leaving the unassuming law office and the ruins of my former life behind. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could feel the shockwaves emanating from that conference room, a silent, seismic event that was cracking the very foundations of their world. My phone, which I had placed on silent, began to vibrate incessantly in my bag. A frantic, desperate buzzing. The chaos had begun. Back in that room, I imagined the scene. The stunned disbelief gave way to frantic denial. My father, Arthur, his face pale, was likely staring at the folder I'd left as if it were a venomous snake. He'd be sputtering. "She's lying. It's a bluff. A trick." He'd look to David, his lawyer's son-in-law, for confirmation, for a way out. But David, pale and sweating, would be staring at the name Catherine Pierce and realizing his career was about to flash before his eyes. He wouldn't be thinking about family loyalty. He'd be thinking about his malpractice insurance. Ethan would be the first to truly panic. He'd grab his phone, stabbing at my number on the screen, his mind racing. His investors, his company, his penthouse apartment. All of it was built on a foundation of lies he hadn't even known existed. The realization that his entire identity as a successful entrepreneur was a fiction funded by the sister he'd always looked down on. It would be a blow more devastating than any financial loss. Then would come the accusations. Olivia would turn on my mother. "You knew about this. You must have known she had money." And my mother, Helen, would dissolve into tears, wailing, "I didn't know. How could I have known? She always told me she was just getting by." The perfect united family front would shatter into a million pieces, each of them turning on the other in a desperate scramble to find someone else to blame. By the time my flight took off from the private airfield, my phone had logged 37 missed calls and over 50 text messages. The storm had broken, and it was a Category 5 hurricane of their own making. Safely ensconced in my new, sun-drenched house in Miami, with Lily asleep in her new bedroom overlooking the ocean, I finally sat down on my terrace and listened to the voicemails. It was like listening to the audio logs of a sinking ship. The first was from Ethan. His voice was a raw, strangled cry of disbelief. "Chloe? What the hell was that? What did you mean you paid for everything? This is some kind of sick joke, right? Call me back. You have to call me back. My investors? They're all gone. You did this. You have to fix it." His voice cracked on the last word, the arrogant CEO replaced by a terrified little boy. The next was from Olivia. She wasn't shouting. She was crying. Hysterical, gasping sobs. "How could you?" She wept into the phone. "How could you be so cruel? My children, they're going to have to go to public school. Do you have any idea what people will say? Our friends. My charity board. You've ruined us. You've ruined everything just to be spiteful." She didn't mention the Thanksgiving dinner. She didn't mention the custody threat. In her mind, her social standing was the real victim here. Then came my mother's message. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, the kind she had perfected over a lifetime. Her voice was thick with tears, a trembling, wounded whisper. "Chloe, sweetheart, it's Mom. I don't understand. After everything I've done for you, everything I sacrificed to give you and your brother a good life, how could you do this to your own mother? We're going to lose the house you grew up in, all those memories. Don't they mean anything to you? Your father, he's not well. This shock, it could kill him. Is that what you want, Chloe? Do you want your father's death on your conscience?" She painted me as a matricidal monster, conveniently forgetting her silent complicity in my father's abuse. The final message was from a number I didn't recognize. It was David. His voice was low, shaky, and stripped of all its lawyerly confidence. "Chloe, listen, what you said in there, about the mortgage, about Catherine Pierce. We need to talk. Off the record. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Arthur was just upset. He didn't mean what he said about Lily. We can make this go away. We can negotiate." Negotiate. He was trying to bargain his way out of a lawsuit that could get him disbarred. He was terrified. Good. I deleted all the voicemails. The texts were more of the same, a frantic barrage of blame, threats, and pathetic attempts at manipulation. From Ethan, "You are dead to me. You destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." From Olivia, "I will never forgive you for what you've done to my children." From my mother, "Please, Chloe, just call me. We can fix this. Your father is beside himself. Please think about what you're doing." It was a symphony of denial. Not a single message contained the words, "I'm sorry." Not a single one acknowledged their own actions. In their narrative, they were the victims. I was the villain, the unnatural daughter who had turned on her own loving family for no reason. They couldn't see the truth. They couldn't comprehend that this wasn't an attack. It was a consequence. This was the bill for decades of cruelty, arrogance, and disrespect finally coming due. A few days later, a package arrived via courier. It was from my mother. Inside was no letter, no apology. Just a single, framed photograph. It was a picture of me and Ethan as children, maybe 6 or 7 years old, smiling on a sunny day at the beach. We looked happy. We looked like a normal, loving family. It was a desperate, pathetic attempt to weaponize my own memories against me. A reminder of a time before the lines were drawn, before I was cast as the disappointment. She was trying to remind me of the family I was supposedly destroying, not realizing that the family in that photograph had been an illusion for a very, very long time. I looked at the picture for a long moment. I saw the little girl with the hopeful smile, the girl who just wanted her father's approval and her mother's warmth. I felt a pang of sadness for her, for everything she had endured. Then I took the frame, walked out to the trash receptacle by the side of my new house, and dropped it inside. The sound of the glass cracking against the plastic was a strangely satisfying punctuation mark. The final act of their desperate campaign came a week later. I was sitting on my terrace when the security gate buzzed. My assistant, Diane, patched the call through to my phone. It was my father. His voice, for the first time, was not booming or angry. It was quiet, subdued, almost pleading. "Chloe," he said, "let me in. I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about, Dad," I replied, my voice calm. The restraining order was now in full effect. He was violating it just by being here. "Please," he said, and the words sounded foreign coming from his lips. "Just 5 minutes. I need to understand." "You had 30 years to understand," I told him. "The time for talking is over." Then, his voice changed, the old arrogance flaring up through the desperation. "You listen to me, young lady. I am still your father. You will not do this. If you don't reverse this madness, if you don't stop this lawyer and put the money back, you will be utterly alone. No one will stand by you after you've destroyed your own family. You'll have nothing and no one. Is that what you want?" I looked out at the turquoise ocean, at the clear blue sky. I thought of Lily, safe and happy in her new school. I thought of my new friends, the neighbors who had welcomed us with open arms. I thought of my work, my foundation, the new life I was building, a life based on respect and authenticity. And I realized he was wrong. I wasn't destroying my family. I was escaping it. I wasn't losing everything. I was finally gaining it. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. "Goodbye, Dad," I said, and I disconnected the call. I instructed my security team to escort him off the property and to notify the local police of the restraining order violation. The war wasn't over. But this battle was mine. They had thrown every weapon in their arsenal at me: anger, guilt, pity, nostalgia, threats. And none of it had left a scratch. They were out of ammunition, and I was just getting started. After hanging up on my father, I felt a profound sense of calm. The buzzing in my bag had stopped. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet clarity. I walked back into my house, picked up my phone, and with a series of simple taps, I blocked their numbers. My father, my mother, Ethan, Olivia, David. One by one, their names vanished from my contact list. It wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of sanitation. I was cleaning out the toxicity, creating a sterile field where I could finally begin to heal. The next morning, I called Catherine, my lawyer. "They're escalating," I told her, my voice steady. "My father showed up at my house, violating the restraining order." "The police have been notified," she confirmed. "He'll be receiving a formal warning. If he tries it again, he'll be arrested." "Now, about their attempts to contact you." "That's why I'm calling," I said. "From this moment forward, all communication with them goes through you. I will not be speaking to them directly. Not by phone, not by text, not in person. Any attempts they make to reach me are to be documented as harassment. The door is closed, Catherine. I want you to lock it, bolt it, and throw away the key." This was it. The final declaration. For 30 years, I had lived with an open-door policy, hoping they would one day walk through it with love and acceptance. Instead, they had used it to bring in judgment, cruelty, and chaos. Now, I was changing the locks. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for their respect. I was demanding it by making it a non-negotiable condition of any future contact, however remote. I was no longer responsible for their feelings, their finances, or their self-inflicted crises. My only responsibility was to my daughter and to myself. The boundary had been drawn, not in the sand, but in solid steel. Jung Noi Jae Kam Hung. For the first time in her life, she didn't back down. She chose herself instead of choosing to please them. This is such a critical moment. If you support this powerful decision, drop a emoji in the comments to send her strength on this journey. And that strength, I soon discovered, wasn't just coming from within. It was all around me, in places I had been too busy surviving to notice. It was in the quiet competence of my executive assistant, Diane. A few days after the final confrontation, she walked into my new home office, which overlooked the sparkling turquoise water of the Atlantic. She placed a hot coffee on my desk, exactly how I liked it. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" or "How are you holding up?" She just looked at the view, then looked at me, and a slow, proud smile spread across her face. "We did it, boss," she said. And in those 3 simple words, I heard everything. Partnership, loyalty, respect. She wasn't just my employee, she was my ally. She was the first member of my new board of directors, the one who governed the growing enterprise of my own life. The support also came from unexpected places. Our new next-door neighbors in Miami were a warm, boisterous family, the Ramirezes. Maria and Carlos had twin daughters just a year older than Lily. The first time we met, Maria was wrestling with a garden hose and accidentally sprayed me over the hedge. Instead of a stuffy, awkward apology like my mother would have given, she burst out laughing, a deep, genuine belly laugh that was instantly infectious. That evening, they insisted we come over for a barbecue. I was hesitant at first, conditioned by years of family gatherings that felt more like interrogations. But as I sat on their patio, watching Lily chase fireflies with her new friends, a feeling I hadn't realized was missing washed over me. It was easy. Simple, uncomplicated ease. No one asked me what I did for a living with a judgmental tilt to their head. No one compared Lily to their own children. Carlos, a contractor, was more interested in showing me the proper way to grill ribs. Maria, a nurse, just wanted to share funny stories about her last shift. They didn't care about my bank account or my marital status. They just saw a neighbor, a fellow parent, a friend. As they packed up a plate of leftovers for me to take home, Maria gave me a warm hug. "We're so glad you're here, Chloe," she said. "It's good to have you in the neighborhood." It was a simple sentence, but it was more of a welcome than my own family had given me in a decade. This was my new family, my family of choice. It was Diane, with her unwavering loyalty. It was Catherine Pierce with her fierce advocacy. It was Maria and Carlos, with their effortless kindness and laughter. It was a community built not on obligation or blood, but on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care. They weren't just characters in the background of my life, they were becoming the co-authors of my next chapter. I realized then that for years, I had been starving for connection in the middle of a feast. I had a family tree with deep roots, but the branches were bare and offered no shade. I had been trying to draw water from a dry well, begging for nourishment from people who had none to give. Now, I was finally planting my own garden. I was surrounding myself with people who didn't just tolerate my presence, they celebrated it. People who saw my strength not as a threat, but as an asset. People who understood that a family isn't something you're born into, it's something you build. One respectful, loving, and authentic connection at a time. And as I watched Lily's silhouette dancing on the lawn against the warm glow of the Ramirez's kitchen window, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we were finally, truly, home. 6 months. That's how long it took for the dust to settle, for the echoes of the explosion to fade. 6 months since I had walked out of that conference room and into my new life. Now, standing on the balcony of my home in Miami, the warm sea breeze on my face, the chaos of my old life felt like a story that had happened to someone else. Below me, on the white sand, Lily was laughing, her bright pink bucket hat a tiny splash of color against the vast blue of the ocean. She was building a magnificent sandcastle, complete with seashell decorations. She was thriving. She was happy. And for the first time in a very long time, so was I. Life was peaceful. The frantic energy I had poured into survival for so long was now being channeled into creation. I had officially moved my company's headquarters to Miami, and more importantly, I had launched the New Beginnings Foundation, my passion project, a nonprofit dedicated to providing grants, mentorship, and childcare support for single parents in the tech industry. I was using my pain to build a ladder for others, turning my story into a source of strength, not just for myself, but for people who were walking the same lonely path I once had. The news from Connecticut came in sporadic updates from Catherine. My countersuit had been devastatingly effective. Faced with financial ruin and public humiliation, my family had quickly agreed to a settlement. The custody threat was dropped, and they signed a legally binding agreement to cease all contact unless initiated by me. The consequences of their actions had been swift and severe. My parents lost the house. They now live in a small condominium, their lifestyle dramatically downsized. My father, after a minor health scare brought on by stress, had been forced into a quiet retirement, stripped of the status and power he had worshipped his entire life. Ethan's company had gone bankrupt. The golden child, who had never worked a real day in his life, was now working a 9-to-5 job in corporate finance. The penthouse was gone, replaced by a modest apartment. He was forced to learn the lessons I had learned at 16. How to budget, how to be self-sufficient, how to live without a safety net. Olivia and David had stayed together, but their social circle had shrunk considerably after the scandal of the lawsuit became local gossip. Their children were adjusting to public school, learning a different kind of lesson about life than the one taught in the halls of their exclusive private academy. They were all forced to live in the real world now, the world I had always inhabited. I hadn't spoken to any of them directly since that day in the conference room. I needed the silence. I needed the space to build my new world without the ghosts of the old one haunting me. But then, one evening, as I was watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, my phone buzzed with a text from an unsaved number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. The message was short. It was from my father. "Hope you and Lily are well," it read. "Your mother shows me the pictures you sent Diane. The house looks nice. I've been practicing my sandcastle skills." I stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a grand gesture of remorse. It was something smaller, something more fragile. It was an acknowledgement, a tentative white flag from a defeated king. "I've been practicing my sandcastle skills." It was a clumsy, awkward attempt to connect with his granddaughter on her terms, not his. It was the first time in my life he had ever tried to enter my world, instead of demanding I conform to his. A small, sad smile touched my lips. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a quiet sense of peace. The war was over. And maybe, just maybe, something new could one day be built on the rubble, but it would be built on my terms, with my boundaries. I texted back a simple, "Merry Christmas, Dad." It was enough for now. They say that blood is thicker than water. But I've learned that respect is thicker than blood. I've learned that family isn't about who you share a last name with. It's about who shows up for you, who lifts you, who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you not despite your flaws, but because of your strength. My real family was Diane, who had been my rock. It was Catherine, who had been my sword. It was the Ramirez family next door, who shared their laughter and their leftovers without a second thought. Family, I realized, is not an obligation. It's a choice. It's the community you build, the people you choose to let into the sacred space of your life. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from the family you were born into, so you can finally be free to create the one you deserve. The journey was painful. It cost me everything I thought I wanted. But in return, it gave me everything I truly needed: my freedom, my peace, and the unshakable knowledge of my own worth. And that is a legacy far more valuable than any amount of money. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who refuse to see your worth? How did you navigate those painful but necessary conversations? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice. Because everyone deserves to be the hero of their own story.